Okay, for the Malcolm X and King reading discussion, we are concerned with these three questions here. Depending on the reading you were assigned, I would emphasize these particular lines depending on the reading. And for this class and next class, we will start the transition to looking at different groups and how King and X's views could be used and applied for other groups. Malcolm and Martin. One of the differences historically that usually come up is that Malcolm represented somebody willing to tell Black Americans to stand up for yourself, that it was okay to become violent if you were being attacked. In his eulogy, they would say that Malcolm was our manhood, our living Black manhood. And I think there's something in his approach as far as why they included that particular reference there. Start with line 18. One of the differences, as we know, King was for integration, and Malcolm was somebody that was for separation, as he says here in line 18 of the reading. We do not want to be segregated by the white man. We want to be separated from the white man. And just think about the pros and cons of that particular approach. And what would today's reality look like if that was the approach and the outcome that occurred during the civil rights movement? And I'll come back to this point a little later. In line 63 of the reading, the question comes up, well, who's going to pay for this? Is Malcolm going to demand the federal government give him this money? From his point of view, and he's clear in the reading, this is money that is owed to Black Americans. And so this is not a handout of any kind. I don't think Malcolm would have accepted anything from white males or females without any sort of, work or something in return. He was not somebody that was looking for any sort of handout. Line 63 and 80, where he gets into some of the specifics of his separated community here. And he makes a connection here to Chinatown, how in Chinatown, businesses are all controlled, banks, politics. Just think about what that society looks like, or that community. And here he says that a better job in the white man's factory, a better job in the white man's business. So let's take a look at his idea of separation. If you were somebody applying for a job interview and you did not get that job, it is possible that you might think, well, maybe it's a result of my religion, my race, in Malcolm's case here. And that's what Malcolm was trying to avoid. So that's why he's saying here, we're never going to have that feeling that possibly this is happening as a result of our skin color. So it's just better to separate. We can be in the white man's factory, the white man's business, the white man's economy, but we will never know what true equality is going to be like if at best integration is just a temporary solution. So it's just pointing that particular item out. Let's keep on looking. Let's get to some of the King stuff here. In King's letter, he is protesting in Birmingham, and it was mentioned in the documentary that Birmingham had a pretty nasty race history. It was referred to as Bombingham. As I just want to point out that King is responding to the clergymen who are telling King, don't have your demonstration, hold off, don't do it now. And as King says in the reading, wait means never. And I guess he feels here that the white power structure of the city left the Negro community with no other alternative. Notice how up here he talks about the conditions that brought about this demonstration into being. So I guess here he's saying that the situation in Birmingham is so severe that this is really the cause of this protest that the white power structure King refers to is so afraid of. Privileged groups seldom give up their power. I want you to think about, yes, King is talking about Black Americans and their struggle with segregation, but ultimately King seems more concerned about just groups experiencing equality. And maybe that's another difference between him and X, where X seemed to be more about black and white. King's speeches and some of his writings really were about collective unity, which might be a little more dangerous. So King references these laws, just laws and unjust laws, and the definition here, where King talks about that. He really doesn't have a problem with segregation laws. Uh, if the black population, the group that was impacted by it the most, had a say in creating some of those laws. So here he says a just law is a man-made code, and an unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. So that difference there that he's talking about, notice how he brings religion into the equation as well. And religion and morality are going to have some way of guiding humanity. Line 71, in that particular area, King talks about some of those experiences. And this I bring up because if we remember, we looked at Dubois' on our spiritual strivings. And I find it interesting that Dubois and King, they pretty much bring up some similar ideas, even though he's writing in 1907. I believe it's 1907, 1909, somewhere around there. Where he is giving a card to a girl and she refuses it on the grounds of his skin color. And at that point, he realizes that he's black. Now, he can have a couple of different responses. He can experience some sort of belief that he's inferior. He can become extremely have this hatred towards anything that's white. He can become submissive, and for Dubois, he just chose, hey, I'm going to try to beat these individuals at every particular attempt. And so in this scene here, just think about if these one of these kids here, or maybe all of them, are your children, and they're trying to get access to this amusement park. What would you say if that's the first time that your child has experienced any sort of issue as a result of her skin color? Then that's really about coming to terms and knowing that you are different within America. And again, that's what Malcolm's trying to avoid there. King says that with regard to segregation, you'll have some that will adjust, some that will profit off of segregation, and some that will have a bitterness and hatred. And notice how he brings up the black nationalists. He seems to be taking a direct shot at Malcolm X when he mentions the black nationalists there. And we've done this one already. So just think about the individuals, the one adjusting, the one profiting, and the one that's going to become bitter and have hatred. If we look back at the Emmett Till case, think about the three types of Negroes that King is referring to there. If you are the parents of Emmett Till and maybe you have another son or daughter, maybe another relative who's young, and hey, what happened to Emmett? You have to explain that to them. Which approach are you going to take? Are you going to have a very submissive response, or are you going to respond with some bitterness and hatred and talk about distrusting everything that is white, which was referenced over here? Now let's go back to the Little Rock Nine. In this particular situation, according to the film Eye on the Prize, there was an attempt to lynch one of the Little Rock Nine. And again, if you are a black parent, which one of these individuals that King's describes would you be? And we continue as we look at Alex Wilson, the beating of this particular reporter. We look at the sit-ins that were taking place. It seems to be a constant abuse. We take a look at the LA riots. Now, this is a big gap going to 1991, but again, I am really concerned about the response to oppression. Now, let's take a look at, again, the Hip Hop in the LA Riots documentary. And this scene, they're going to address the beating of Rodney King.
I start moving, Brasenio, Powell, and Wynn, all of them start pounding on me.
People from the apartment complex across the street came out,
hit me in my face. These guys is going for the kill. And he said, we're gonna kill you, nigga. We're gonna kill you, nigga, run. It was a horrible, bloody scene. I mean, I had blood dripping from that wall there all the way down the gutter. They said they'd never seen that much a person.
So the years, in the 90s, it could be any recent case. It could be Trayvon Martin. And again, you're confronted with the same thing that Dubois was talking about in the early 1900s. There seems to be something different with regard to being black in America when some of these race issues emerge. Let's go to 2510 after the verdict for these police officers where there's no punishment. You start to see this.
I joined the crowd. What do you think I did? I joined the crowd. I mean, I started assaulting and, cooking and jabbing like everybody else would.
Who were you assaulting?
Anybody that wasn't black.
Why?
Why? Because I felt I was upset, because of what I saw. That was just another black man, beat at the hands of white people, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? We were tired of it. We was upset about that, Tired of them ass whoopings, It's time to start dealing some of them ass whoopings out.
Well, payback.
So to speak.
So that response right there is one that I'm extremely concerned with because as you look at the outcome of some of these cases and the treatment, there seems to be limited justice when anybody black is attacked or beaten or killed. And, those are issues that King and X were addressing in the 1960s as well. If we already looked at the clip here of Reginald Denny, who was pulled out of his truck and beaten by three black riders. And, I don't necessarily think that these individuals thought they did anything wrong. If you look at the clip, this individual is kind of like mocking this guy and kind of laughing in his face. Back to that point here, you see some of these outcomes of those cases and, how are you going to respond? Are you going to remain passive, submissive? At what point are people going to get angry? A couple of quotes from Malcolm X. Feel free to pause it. Anyway, how were the two different in their approaches? Remember, King was for integration, whereas Malcolm seemed to be for separation to kind of avoid all of these occurrences, whether it's a job interview, whether it's somebody, going out on a run and winds up getting attacked by two individuals and killed. Those approaches definitely are different. When do oppressed groups go to extremes? Think about the frustration. Think about the individual saying, you get tired of those ass whippings. Right there, I mean, he's saying a lot in that particular response. How many Emmett Tills can Black America endure? What role has historical events played in the warning the present? Think about any racial case today and think about how that racial case possibly would play out differently if you didn't have such a negative history attached with this particular, these two particular groups in America.